All right, guys, welcome to a special edition of Lawyered Up. It is Travis Scott's misdemeanor trial that started today, and this is the recap for day one. If you guys don't have any idea what I'm talking about, there is a link to a playlist that has the whole history of what's gone on with former Representative Scott and everything, his impeachment and these charges. There is some stuff that we covered in the previous Lawyered Ups, but that's not on that playlist. But this is the meat and potatoes on the playlist for the history. So today, what happened? Well, if you remember from the previous Lawyered Up, and if you guys have any questions, pop them in the chat, and if I know the answer, I'll try to get it to you. Otherwise, we'll work on getting you the answer, and when we do the next live stream, I'll try to answer it then. But there was a hearing previously where there was a motion to dismiss the case based on whether the amounts that exchanged hands in these misdemeanors were nominal or not. And the judge said she wanted to go to a jury trial, that she was going to have a jury make that determination. That's going to come up again later on when we're talking about today. So the morning basically consisted of jury selection, which is a long process. The jury was selected, and then when both Mr. Matt Hall, who was there for the AG's office as the prosecutor, and Mr. Seacat, who was Travis's lawyer, made their opening statements, and both of them told the jury that we don't differ on the facts of the case, right? Both of us agree to the facts. Basically, what this hinges on is whether the amounts that exchanged hands were nominal and whether we go by Title 31 or we're going by Title 14. And I'll kind of explain that when I get to that. So the first witness that was called was the investigator in the case, Mr. Robert Frost. You guys might know Robert. He's been an investigator out here for a long time. I think he is also an FBI liaison. But Mr. Frost went to the stand and he testified the process that he used to investigate the case, where he confirmed that there is an LLC, that Mr. Scott had purchased this business and went and got copies of all of the relevant purchases that the nation made from this Ace Hardware in Okemah, which Mr. Scott was a part owner with his wife, Cherie Hill, who is the daughter of Chief Hill. And they are now divorced, but at the time they were married. So the timeline there for Mr. Frost's report was he was contacted by who was then the AG, Roger Wiley, and told to investigate this. He prepared a report, and then he gives it over to the prosecutors. In his report, he talks about various titles of the code that may apply to this particular case. And this is something that I found interesting that was pointed out by Mr. Seacat on his cross-examen. Mr. Frost did not include the Title 31 language that states that these purchases have to be over a nominal amount, right? And the reason when he was asked why he didn't include that, he quoted the code, right? And he left ... He didn't put that unless there is a nominal amount. That's the part that he took out in his report. When he was asked why he took that out in his report that he turned over to the prosecutors, he just said, I didn't think it applied. So that was a little interesting. Now, the AG's office, Mr. Hill, is saying that he's prosecuting this case based on Title 14, which doesn't include a provision for nominal amounts. It just says if there's any business exchange between a tribal officer and the nation, then this code applies. Now, the judge has already said at the previous hearing that she is going to have this issue heard whether these amounts are nominal or not. So the judge has already said that should factor into the decision on whether Mr. Scott is convicted of these misdemeanors or not. So I'm going to move on here. That's basically the Mr. Frost went through and they verified all the paperwork for all of the various conflicts, the purchases that Mr. Scott has been charged with for the conflict of interest misdemeanors. And so I'm not going to go through all of that because it's basically just saying, yes, this paperwork was filed. It was all filed correctly through the finance and everything. They had POs, everything was signed off on. And that was one of the things that Mr. Seacat was pointing out, is that everybody saw this. It went through all of the proper channels. It was not done in secret. Let's see here. I'm going to move on here. There also, Mr. Frost testified that there was no evidence that Scott received a direct check to him. So they didn't have any check that went directly to Travis. And there was no evidence presented, and Mr. Frost testified there was no evidence that Mr. Scott influenced anybody or tried to pressure anybody to do any business with Ace Hardware. In fact, the next two witnesses were Bobby Green, who was in charge of promotions at the Okemah Casino. The Okemah Casino was the entity that the tribal entity that purchased these things from the Ace Hardware. And they also had, after Mr. Green, they had Casey Jones, who was the general manager of the Okemah Casino. And they both basically testified to the same thing, which is that Okemah Casino had done business with Ace Hardware before Mr. Scott had any ownership in it, and that they continued to do business with him after he got ownership with it, and none of the things changed. In fact, the items that they purchased there that are associated with these charges were for promotional things like Yeti cups and things they would give away in the casino, and they were typically lower priced than they could get them anywhere else. All of these items were underneath of the threshold that the bid requirement would have to be done. Mr. Jones, the GM, testified that the threshold for them is $5,000. Anything over $5,000 would require them to conduct a bidding process, and Okemah Casino wouldn't have anything to do with that. It would be the main office in River Spirit that would handle all those bids and do all of that, right? So those were interesting things that lends more power to the argument that Mr. Seacat, who is Mr. Scott's lawyer, is making, saying that these were nominal amounts, that these amounts weren't even high enough to pass the threshold that you had to bid on them, that the Okemah Casino could just buy these items outright. They did, both Mr. Green and Mr. Jones testified that the casino did, at a certain point after Mr. Scott became a representative, that River Spirit informed them that they couldn't do business with him anymore. They weren't for sure on the date of when that happened, whether that was before or after he was charged. So it could have been after he was charged. River Spirit was like, hey, don't do business anymore. This is causing a legal problem. They both testified that it increased the cost for the casinos because they had to go to some other place to buy lumber and things like that they would have normally gotten through the Ace Hardware that's right there in the casino. They both testified that the Ace Hardware there in Okemah was basically the only choice that they had to buy some of the items that they were going to buy locally, which is a policy of the casino, that they buy locally and that they buy native. All right, so I think I've covered that testimony. Let me see if there's anything else here that I didn't mention. If you guys have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. The things that were purchased were some Yeti cups. There was a cooler purchased. There was a washer and dryer purchased. There were some lawnmowers purchased over these couple of years. I think it's 2018 through 2019 or 2020. Again, those specific dates will be in the previous coverage that's in the link, the playlist in the description of this video. Those things were all used by the casino according to the GM and Mr. Green for promotional purposes. What else? All right, so we've covered all of that. Give me 1 second. I'm trying to catch up to where we are here in my notes. Okay, so that's pretty much it in a nutshell. After Mr. Jones, the GM of the casino, the Okemah Casino, after they had finished asking him questions, the nation rested. Now, I did want to point out something to you guys. Oh, this is something I forgot. If you look here, let me pop this up for you guys really quick. This is the list of filings for the case. If you look down here, you will see that there is a subpoena issued to the Citizenship Office. There is a subpoena issued to the Realty Office, I think. These things, there was a big question for me as to why those subpoenas were issued. And one of the things that came out after the nation rested is that the reason those agencies weren't called to the stand is because those agencies were subpoenaed in order to establish that Mr. Scott was a citizen and that he lived on the reservation in the jurisdiction. And the two parties, the Mr. Seacat and the Mr. Hall for the prosecutor's office, they both agreed to a stipulation at the start of the trial that they weren't going to challenge his citizenship and all those things. So they didn't need to call those parties to do that type of those questions. So for tomorrow, well, let me back up and get you caught up. So the nation rested, and then Mr. Seacat made a motion to dismiss along the lines of the motion to dismiss that was made at an earlier hearing. Now, if you go in a time machine and go back to that earlier hearing, the motion that he had made was that these amounts were of a nominal amount, and so he shouldn't have been charged, basically. And the judge said at that hearing, I want to hear the evidence that the prosecutor's office has for charging him with this, and then we'll see if we can make a decision. So after they had presented all this evidence, Mr. Seacat makes the motion to dismiss again, and he says, okay, Judge, so we've heard that these purchases were less than the amounts that are required for bidding, right? So right there, they're nominal amounts. They're not even enough to have to require bids to be gotten. And then Title 31 says that if it's nominal amounts, this shouldn't be looked at. When Mr. Hall got up to give his answer to the motion, he said, well, I'm not using Title 31 in my charges. I'm using Title 14, and there's no part of Title 14 that says if it's a nominal amount, I can't charge him. I have to go by Title 14. Now, the problem with that argument in particular is the judge has already said she wants a determination of whether she thinks that whether they're nominal amounts or not is important in this case. And that's what the judge said. She said, I'm not going to dismiss the case right now. We've got a jury. They've heard evidence. We're going to hear the rest of our witnesses tomorrow, and then the jury is going to decide with instructions from me to consider this issue with this nominal amount consideration, right? Is it a nominal amount? And so she overruled the motion to demur, which is basically dismissing the case. And we're going to have court again tomorrow morning starting at 9 a.m. And this is where the juicy bit happens. Tomorrow, we're looking at Principal Chief David Hill taking the stand. We're looking at Second Chief Del Beaver taking the stand. And we're looking at former Principal Chief James Floyd taking the stand because he was Principal Chief when these charges were filed. If you look here, let me pop this up for you guys one more time. At the bottom here, it says, Affidavit of Service James Floyd served on 12/07/23. Okay. Now, this is a rumor. This is just what I've heard, is that Chief Floyd has had surgery recently. So we'll see if he actually comes to testify or whatever. And I don't know what consideration the judge is going to give him on that, but he should be called the projections from the prosecutor, the defense, and the judge is that this whole thing is going to be wrapped up by noon tomorrow. And so I will be coming back and giving you guys an update on that. Let me take a look here at the chat and see if there's any questions. How's the native business industry? I don't know. This case in particular is going to put a chill on any citizens doing business with the nation because of this situation where if you're related to a councilman or you have interest in a business, the communities are so close-knit. You know, like in Okemah, this is basically, that's what the GM was testifying to. Mr. Jones is saying this is the only place we can go to get stuff in Okemah. You know, anything else, so we got to go somewhere else to get it, right? And travel a distance. He said they would have to travel to Henrietta to get the stuff. So that's a problem. All right. I don't see any questions. It's 4:45. Let me swoop through my notes really quick and see if there's anything major that I didn't cover. No. Looks good. All right. So, coming up next, guys, part of the reason I wanted to get this out as fast as I could, we have a live wire scheduled for today at 6 o'clock. We are going to be talking to the director of the Netflix film Fry Bread Face and Me. So this is a huge film. It's about a Navajo boy who lives in Sacramento going back to live on the reservation, and he has some adventures with another res kid on the res. So a pretty interesting movie. And we're going to have the director on. His name is eluding me right now, but it's in the description of that. So tune in at 6 o'clock. And then tomorrow we'll have day 2 of Travis's trial, and we'll give you the updates. It should be around noon or 1 o'clock. And then tomorrow evening at 6 p.m., we have another live wire where we're going to be talking to the directors, Rebecca Lansbury and Joe, I can't remember his last name right, about the Bad Press documentary and whether it's going to be able to get Oscar consideration and what their year going to all these festivals has been like. So the response to the documentary. So tune in for that tomorrow. And then on Wednesday at, I believe it's 10 a.m., Gary is going to have some people on his show to talk about the boarding schools. So if you want to check that out, that'll be happening. I think that's at 10 on Wednesday. So with that being said, I don't see any questions. Mado for tuning in, and I'll see you guys tomorrow. Chihichoth, Lees.